There are two versions of this conflict, the one being described in official statements, and the one being negotiated in rooms that do not appear on any official schedule. This video is about the second one, because what is happening in the back channels right now is more consequential for the trajectory of this war than anything being announced at a press briefing. Start with what has been confirmed, not by official statements, but by the accumulation of sourced reporting across multiple independent outlets. Pakistan's foreign ministry is carrying messages between Washington and Tehran. Egypt's diplomatic channel is active. Turkey's foreign minister has conducted more than a dozen calls with Iranian, American and European counterparts in 48 hours. Oman, which brokered the 2015 nuclear framework behind closed doors for 2 years before a single public word was spoken, has reopened its channel. 4 separate intermediary tracks, running simultaneously, none of them officially acknowledged by either primary party. NPR confirmed the back-channel activity is real. A former Trump-Iran negotiator described both the American and Iranian public positions as simultaneously true and simultaneously misleading, because both sides are communicating one thing, publicly, while doing something different through intermediaries. That is not hypocrisy. That is the mechanics of how wars end when neither side can afford to be the first to publicly say the word negotiation. Now examine the Gulf dimension of this diplomatic picture, because it is the development that has received the least analytical attention and carries the most significant strategic weight. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait and Bahrain entered this conflict as implicit American partners. Their territory hosts American bases, their airspace facilitates American operations, their financial systems support the logistical architecture of the American military presence in the region. That alignment is no longer unconditional. Qatar's foreign ministry has called for immediate negotiation as the only path to ending the conflict. Qatar hosts the largest American airbase in the Middle East. When the country hosting your largest regional airbase publicly advocates for negotiations that Washington has not yet endorsed, that is not a diplomatic preference. That is a strategic signal delivered through the most direct channel available to a small state with significant leverage. With GCC Secretary-General stated that Iran's actions have overcome all red lines. That statement was widely read as a condemnation of Iran. It was also a communication to Washington that the Gulf states' tolerance for a conflict that is destroying their airports, cutting their oil exports, and stranding 20,000 seafarers in their waters has its own limits. The Gulf states did not sign up to absorb indefinite collateral damage from a conflict they did not initiate, and the diplomatic signals emerging from Doha, Riyadh, and Abu Dhabi suggest they are beginning to communicate that boundary directly. The ultimatum dimension of this diplomatic picture is the element that deserves the most careful examination, because it is the one that has been most consistently misreported. The public framing presents a single ultimatum, American power demanding Iranian compliance. The operational record presents something considerably more complicated. Multiple simultaneous ultimatums moving in multiple directions with different deadlines and different consequences attached. Washington's ultimatum to Tehran: reopen Hormuz or face strikes on power plants. Publicly stated, publicly extended, publicly suspended. Each iteration reducing its credibility as a coercive instrument. An ultimatum that is extended 3 times is no longer an ultimatum. It is a negotiating position disguised as a deadline. Tehran's ultimatum to the Gulf states: stop providing American forces with basing access and airspace or face continued strikes on your energy infrastructure. Delivered not through diplomatic channels, but through the operational record of 30 days of strikes on Gulf airports, oil facilities and military installations. The Gulf states are receiving this ultimatum in real time through their damage reports. Kuwait's airport has been struck multiple times. Saudi Arabia's largest oil facilities have been targeted. Qatar's LNG infrastructure has been hit. The message does not require a formal diplomatic note. It is written in strike reports, and the Gulf states are beginning to respond to it quietly. through diplomatic positioning that does not yet constitute a change of alignment, but is moving in that direction faster than Washington's official narrative accounts for. The framework that would end this conflict, if one exists, has never been publicly described by any party with the authority to implement it. America's 15-point plan was described by Iran as maximalist. Iran's 5 conditions were described by Washington as non-starters. Israel has stated explicitly that it is not party to U.S.-Iran talks and will continue operating independently of whatever framework Washington constructs. 3 parties, 0 overlapping definitions of what an acceptable end looks like, and yet the back channels are active. The intermediaries are moving, the Gulf states are signaling, and every party to this conflict is communicating something privately that contradicts what it is saying publicly. That gap between public position and private communication is where wars end. It is also where they escalate when the private communication fails to produce movement before the next strike package arrives. The most significant diplomatic development of the last 48 hours did not appear in any official statement. It appeared in a sequence of positioning moves that only become visible when assembled together. Pakistan offering to host talks, Oman reopening its channel, Qatar publicly advocating for negotiations while hosting the American airbase that anchors the entire regional operation, Turkey conducting simultaneous calls with every party simultaneously, and a Gulf Cooperation Council statement that condemned Iran while also communicating to Washington that the tolerance of the alliance's regional partners is not unlimited. That sequence does not describe business as usual. It describes an alliance structure that is beginning to reposition around the recognition that this conflict needs an exit and that the exit will not come from the parties most directly involved in the fighting. Evidence first, analysis second. You decide what it means. Subscribe and turn on notifications. When the back-channel framework produces a public signal, a summit offer, a formal mediation proposal, a ceasefire condition that both primary parties decline to immediately reject, when a Gulf state moves from diplomatic signaling to formal repositioning, when the private communications that are currently moving through Islamabad, Muscat, Ankara, and Cairo produce a development that the official narrative cannot absorb without acknowledging, the analysis will be here.